The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Maya could feel the heat radiating from her swollen cheek, but it was nothing compared to the ice-cold dread spreading through her chest as she watched her brother's massive frame block out the neon glow from the highway beyond. Marcus hadn't changed much in the 5 years since she'd last seen him. If anything, he'd grown more imposing, his shoulders broader beneath the black leather coat that bore the winged death's head of the Hells Angels, his presence filling the small diner like smoke from a wildfire. The patches on his vest told stories Maya didn't want to remember. 1%, enforcer, and beneath it all, property of nobody. She'd chosen this job specifically because it was far from his world. Mel's diner sat at the intersection of nowhere and forgotten, serving truckers and night shift workers who minded their own business. The owner, Mel Kozlowski, was a 70-year-old former Marine who asked no questions and paid cash. It was supposed to be invisible, safe. So how the hell was Marcus here? The sandy-haired college boy, the one who'd hit her, opened his mouth as if to speak, but no sound emerged. His two friends had gone pale, their earlier bravado evaporating like steam off hot coffee. One of them, a pudgy kid in a Stanford sweatshirt, was slowly backing toward the rear exit, his expensive sneakers squeaking against the linoleum. Marcus's eyes never left the leader. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the kind of quiet menace that made smart people run and stupid people wet themselves. "You boys lost?" The question hung in the air like a threat wrapped in casual conversation. Maya knew that tone. She'd heard it countless times growing up, usually right before someone learned why Marcus had earned his road name. Ice didn't refer to his temperament. It referred to what happened to people who crossed him. "We were just—" Stanford sweatshirt started, but Marcus silenced him with a look. "Wasn't talking to you." His gaze shifted to the sandy-haired kid, who was now trembling despite his obvious attempts to appear tough. "Asked if you were lost. Simple question." Maya found her voice. "Marcus, don't—" Maya. The way he said her name, not harsh but final, told her to stay quiet. "These boys interrupt your work?" She could lie. Could say it was nothing, that they were just leaving. 5 years ago, that's exactly what she would have done. Maya Rodriguez, always covering for others, always trying to smooth things over, always believing she could handle problems herself. But her cheek was still burning, and she could taste blood where she'd bitten her tongue when his hand connected. More than that, she was tired, bone-deep, soul-crushing tired of being pushed around by entitled pricks who thought her uniform made her less than human. "They came in after closing," she said quietly. "Demanded service." When I said no, she didn't need to finish. Marcus had already cataloged the red handprint on her face, the overturned salt shaker where she'd stumbled into the table, the way she was unconsciously favoring her left side. The leader finally found his voice. "Look, man, we don't want any trouble. We'll just—" "Trouble?" Marcus took a single step forward, and Maya watched 21 years of privilege crumble in the space of a heartbeat. "Nah, kid. Trouble is what you had when you put your hands on my sister. This," he gestured casually around the diner, "this is consequences." The word sister hit the college boys like a physical blow. Stanford sweatshirt whimpered, actually whimpered, and the third boy, who'd been silent until now, looked like he might faint. But Maya was focused on something else entirely. Marcus hadn't asked how she was, hadn't seemed surprised to find her here. He'd walked in like he'd known exactly what he'd find, like he'd been expecting this moment. "How did you know?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Marcus glanced at her, and for just a moment, his expression softened. Not much. Ice Rodriguez didn't do emotion in public, but enough for her to see the brother who used to sneak her extra Halloween candy and beat up Tommy Hernandez for pulling her pigtails. "Later," he said, which wasn't an answer at all. He turned back to the college boys, and Maya realized with growing horror that this wasn't going to end with them just walking away. She knew that look, had seen it on Marcus's face the night he'd put Raul Mendoza in the hospital for dealing drugs near her high school, the night that had made her understand she could never truly escape the violence that followed her family like a shadow. Outside, The fog continued to roll in from the coast, wrapping around the diner like a shroud. Highway 58 stretched empty in both directions, and Maya realized with crystal clarity that no one was coming to help these boys. No one even knew they were here. The realization hit Maya like a freight train. She had to choose. Right here, right now, in this fluorescent-lit tomb of a diner, she had to decide who she was going to be. Marcus. Her voice cut through the tension like a blade. They're leaving. Now. Her brother's head turned slightly, not quite looking at her, but acknowledging her words. The college boys seized the moment like drowning men grabbing a life preserver. "Yeah, we're leaving," the leader stammered, his earlier arrogance completely evaporated. "We're sorry, we didn't know." "You didn't know what?" Maya stepped forward, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. "That I'm a human being who deserves basic respect? That hitting service workers has consequences?" She gestured toward the door. "Get out. Don't come back." They scrambled for the exit like roaches when the lights came on, the bell above the door chiming frantically as they burst onto Highway 58. Through the windows, Maya watched them pile into a silver BMW and peel out, taillights disappearing into the fog. The silence that followed felt different from before, heavier, loaded with 5 years of unspoken words and careful distance. Marcus was studying her face, cataloging the damage with the clinical precision she remembered from childhood. "You need ice for that." "I'm fine." The lie came automatically, a reflex developed over years of working jobs where showing weakness meant losing shifts, losing money, losing the precarious stability she'd built for herself and Sophia. Sophia. The thought of her 4-year-old daughter, asleep in their cramped apartment 15 minutes away, sent a fresh wave of panic through Maya's chest. This was exactly what she'd been trying to avoid. The violence, the attention, the way trouble followed the Rodriguez name like a curse. "Mel's got a first aid kit in the office," she said, more to fill the silence than anything else. She moved behind the counter, muscle memory guiding her through the closing routine she'd performed hundreds of times. Wipe down surfaces, check the register, turn off the coffee pot. Normal things, safe things. Marcus remained motionless in the center of the diner, his presence transforming the familiar space into something foreign and dangerous. The Hell's Angels patch on his back seemed to pulse under the harsh lights, that winged death's head that had been the boogeyman of her teenage years. "You look good, Maya." His voice had softened, carrying echoes of the brother who used to help her with algebra homework. "Different." She almost laughed. Different. 5 years of working double shifts, of choosing between groceries and utilities, of lying awake at night wondering if Sophia would grow up ashamed of their second-hand clothes and government cheese. Different barely covered it. "I go by Rodriguez now," she said, dumping the coffee grounds with more force than necessary. "Drop the maiden name. Smart." He paused. "How's the kid?" The question shouldn't have surprised her, but it did. Marcus had never met Sophia, had never even acknowledged her existence beyond a single text message when Maya had sent him a birth announcement 4 years ago. His response had been characteristically brief. "She's beautiful. Stay safe." "She's good." Starting pre-K in January. Maya found herself fighting the urge to show him pictures, to share stories about Sophia's obsession with dinosaurs and her habit of singing herself to sleep. That was the old Maya talking, the sister who used to worship her big brother, who used to believe his violence made him heroic instead of dangerous. "That's good. Kids need school, structure." Marcus shifted his weight, and Maya caught a glimpse of the gun holstered beneath his jacket. The reminder of what he was, what he represented, sent ice through her veins. She'd built something here, not much maybe, a job that paid the bills, a small apartment where Sophia felt safe, a life measured in lunch rush tips and bedtime stories. It wasn't glamorous, but it was theirs. Clean. "I have to finish closing," she said, the words coming out sharper than intended. "Mel will be here at 5:30 for the breakfast prep." Marcus nodded slowly, as if her dismissal didn't surprise him. "I'll wait. Make sure you get to your car safe." "That's not necessary." "Yeah, it is." His tone brooked no argument. Those boys might be stupid enough to come back, or wait for you in the parking lot. College kids think they're invincible right up until they're not. Maya wanted to argue, to insist she could handle herself, but the throbbing in her cheek reminded her of how quickly things could go wrong. And beneath her frustration was something else, something that felt dangerously like relief. For 5 years, she'd been carrying everything alone, making every decision with no backup, no safety net beyond her own determination. Having Marcus here, despite everything it represented, felt like breathing after holding her breath underwater. The fog pressed against the windows like curious fingers, and Highway 58 stretched into darkness in both directions. Maya methodically finished her closing tasks, hyper-aware of her brother's watchful presence and the questions that hung between them like ghosts. How had he known where to find her? Who had called him? And why, after 5 years of careful silence, did his timing feel less like coincidence and more like inevitability? Maya was counting the register when Marcus's phone buzzed. The sound, a low, insistent vibration against leather, made her hands freeze over the crumpled bills. In the 5 years since she'd cut ties with his world, she'd forgotten how that simple sound could transform a room. Business calls to the Hells Angels didn't come during normal hours, and they were never good news. Marcus glanced at the screen, and something shifted in his expression. The casual watchfulness that had defined his presence since walking through the door sharpened into something predatory. "You expecting anyone?" he asked, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet she remembered from childhood. "What? No, Mel doesn't come in until... Someone's been watching you, Maya." The words hit her like a physical blow. The $20 bills in her hands suddenly felt weightless, meaningless. "What are you talking about?" Marcus held up his phone, showing her a text message from an unknown number. "College boys getting handsy with your sister at Mel's diner. Might want to check it out. Timing isn't coincidence." The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m., exactly when the three boys had been escalating from verbal abuse to physical violence. Someone had been watching. Someone had seen everything unfold and had known exactly who to call. Jesus. Maya's legs felt unsteady. She gripped the counter's edge, her knuckles white against the scarred formica. Who sent this? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Marcus was already moving, his boots heavy against the linoleum as he crossed to the windows. He peered through the fog-streaked glass, scanning the empty parking lot with professional thoroughness. Phone number's a burner. Text came through a routing service that bounces signals off cell towers from here to Sacramento. Maya's mind raced. Someone had her location, her schedule, knew about Marcus. Someone had been patient enough to wait months, the text had said months, gathering information before making their move. "This doesn't make sense," she said, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew they were a lie. In the world Marcus inhabited, everything made sense if you were willing to follow the logic far enough into the darkness. Marcus turned from the window, and Maya saw something she'd never seen in her brother's face before: genuine concern, not the casual protectiveness he'd always shown her, but real fear. "Maya, I need you to think. Anyone been asking questions about you? New customers who seem too interested? Someone hanging around when your shifts change?" She wanted to say no, to insist that her careful anonymity had kept her safe. But as she searched her memory, details began surfacing like objects in a tide pool. The man in the baseball cap who'd been nursing coffee in the corner booth 3 nights running last week. The woman who'd asked specifically for Maya to take her order, then barely touched her food. The feeling she'd had lately of being watched, dismissed as paranoia born of exhaustion and stress. "There have been people," she admitted. "But Mel's gets all kinds of night owls. Truckers, insomniacs, people working weird shifts. I didn't think..." "You weren't supposed to think about it. That's the point." Marcus was back at her side now, his presence both comforting and terrifying. "Someone's been building a file on you, your routines, your work schedule, your connections. They knew exactly when to send that text to get maximum impact." The implications crashed over Maya like a wave. Someone hadn't just found her, they'd been studying her, learning her patterns, her vulnerabilities, and they'd been patient enough to wait for the perfect moment to pull her back into the world she'd fought so hard to escape. Sophia. The name escaped as a whisper. Her daughter was 15 minutes away, asleep in their apartment with Mrs. Chen, the elderly neighbor who watched her during Maya's night shifts. Safe, she told herself. Sophia was safe, but was she? Marcus read her expression with the ease of someone who'd spent years navigating dangerous situations. We'll check on her, right now. But first, you need to decide something. Maya looked up at him, seeing not the cold enforcer who'd walked through the door an hour ago, but the brother who'd taught her to ride a bike and helped her sneak out to her first concert. The brother whose protection had always come at a price. I can handle this alone, try to figure out who's been watching you and why. But if I do that, you stay exposed. You and Sophia both. His voice was steady, matter of fact. Or you let me help, really help. But that means coming back into my world, at least temporarily. It means accepting that the clean life you built might have to get a little dirty. Outside, the fog continued to thicken, turning Highway 58 into a tunnel of yellow light that stretched into uncertainty. Maya realized that the choice had never really been about whether to accept Marcus's help. It was about whether she was willing to fight for the life she'd built, even if it meant risking everything she'd tried to leave behind. The choice hung between them like a blade suspended by thread, sharp enough to cut through everything Maya had spent 5 years building. She stared at her brother's face, weathered by violence and choices she'd never wanted to understand, and felt the weight of every decision that had led her to this moment. "You don't get it," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't just step back into that world, even temporarily, even for Sophia." Marcus's expression didn't change, but she caught the slight tension around his eyes. "Maya? No, listen to me." The words came faster now, 5 years of careful distance collapsing into this single moment. "Do you know what it took to build this? To become someone who could walk into a bank and get approved for an apartment lease? Someone whose name doesn't make social workers ask extra questions about my daughter's home environment?" She gestured around the diner, at the cracked vinyl booths and fluorescent lights that had become her sanctuary. "This job pays $9 to $50 an hour plus tips. On a good night, I might clear $70. I've got exactly $436 in savings, and Sophia needs new shoes before winter really hits." Her voice cracked. "But it's mine, Marcus. Every shift, every dollar, every small decision, it's mine, clean." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Maya could see him processing her words with the same methodical precision he applied to everything else. When he spoke, his voice carried a gentleness that transported her back to childhood, to whispered conversations in the hallway outside their mother's bedroom when the fights got too loud. "You think I don't know what you sacrificed?" He pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then showed her the screen. It was a photo of Sophia from her preschool's website, a bright, gap-toothed smile beneath carefully braided hair. "I've been watching over you both for 5 years, Maya. From a distance, but watching. You think those rent payments that got mysteriously credited to your account were accidents? The scholarship fund that covered Sophia's daycare?" The words hit her like a physical blow. All those times she'd thought she was making it on her own, building something independent and clean, Marcus had been there, invisible but present, his money smoothing over the rough edges of their precarious existence. "No." The word escaped as a gasp. "No, I never asked for that." "You didn't have to ask. You're my sister. Sophia's my niece." Marcus pocketed the phone, and Maya caught a glimpse of something raw and vulnerable in his expression before the mask slipped back into place. "But this is different. This isn't about money or keeping you stable from a distance. Someone's actively hunting you, and that means Sophia's in their crosshairs too." Maya's hands were shaking now, the implications crashing over her in waves. Every choice she'd made, every sacrifice to build a legitimate life, had been built on a foundation she hadn't even known existed. The independence she'd clung to like a life preserver had been an illusion, another form of protection from the brother whose world she'd tried so desperately to escape. "If I do this," she said slowly, "if I let you help, really help, what does that make me? What kind of mother puts her child in danger just to solve problems faster?" "The kind who's willing to fight for her," Marcus replied without hesitation. Maya, you've been running from our family name for 5 years, trying to pretend it doesn't define you, but it's not just about violence and illegal money. Being a Rodriguez means we don't abandon our own. It means when someone threatens what we love, we don't just hope it goes away, we end the threat. Outside, the fog had grown so thick that the highway seemed to disappear entirely, as if the diner existed in its own pocket of reality. Maya thought about Sophia, probably dreaming about dinosaurs in their small apartment, trusting that her mother would always come home safe from work. She thought about Mrs. Chen, who asked no questions about Maya's late hours or the bruises that sometimes accompanied them. She thought about the life she'd built, fragile but real, and the forces that were already working to tear it down. "If we do this," she said, and heard her brother's sharp intake of breath at the word "we," Sophia can't know. Whatever happens, however this plays out, she can't be exposed to what you do. Marcus nodded slowly. She won't be. But Maya, you need to understand. Once we start pulling this thread, we might not like what unravels. Someone's been planning this for months, maybe longer. They know exactly which buttons to push to drag you back into my world. Maya closed her eyes, feeling the last of her resistance crumble like a dam giving way to flood waters. When she opened them again, her brother was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read: pride, mixed with something that might have been sorrow. "Then I guess we'd better figure out who they are," she said, "before they figure out our next move." The words hung in the air between them, and Maya felt something fundamental shift inside her chest, like a door closing on one life and opening onto another. She had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, made a choice that would ripple forward into every decision that came after. Marcus nodded once, a sharp acknowledgement that carried the weight of military precision. "First thing we do is secure Sophia. Mrs. Chen seems solid, but we need to know she's really safe." Maya's throat tightened. Even now, with everything unraveling around her, the instinct to protect her daughter's innocence felt overwhelming. "She can't see you. Not like this. If Sophia asks questions, she won't see me." Marcus was already moving toward the diner's back office, his boots silent despite their weight. "But I need eyes on your building. Someone I trust." He pulled out his phone, and Maya watched him scroll through contacts with names like Reaper and Tank and Bishop. The casual intimacy with which he navigated that world, her world, she realized with a sick twist of inevitability, reminded her of everything she'd spent 5 years trying to forget. "Bones will park across from your complex," Marcus said, thumbs moving across the screen. "Former Marine, 3 kids of his own. He knows how to be invisible." He glanced up at her. "Sophia will never know he's there." Maya wanted to argue, to insist there had to be another way, but the rational part of her mind was already calculating advantages. If someone had been watching her for months, they knew about Sophia, knew about Mrs. Chen, knew about every vulnerability in the small life Maya had constructed. Professional protection suddenly didn't seem like paranoia. It seemed like necessity. "What about the diner?" she asked, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Mel's going to notice if I don't show up for my shifts. You're going to call in sick, food poisoning, maybe a stomach bug that'll keep you down for a few days." Marcus's fingers continued working across his phone screen. "I'm pulling surveillance footage from every business along this stretch of highway. Someone's been casing this place, and they got sloppy tonight when they made their move." Maya finished counting the register with hands that felt disconnected from her body, muscle memory carrying her through the familiar routine, while her mind raced ahead to consequences she couldn't yet imagine. Every choice from here forward would be calculated not just for her and Sophia, but in relation to Marcus's world, a world where violence was currency and loyalty was measured in blood. "There's something else," Marcus said, his tone shifting into something more cautious. "The text I got tonight. Whoever sent it knows about our family connection, but they also knew exactly how to manipulate it. They didn't just want me here to stop those college kids. They wanted you to see me in action, wanted to remind you what I'm capable of." The observation hit Maya like ice water. She'd been so focused on the immediate threat, the mysterious watcher, that she hadn't considered the psychological warfare embedded in the evening's events. Someone had orchestrated her humiliation and Marcus's rescue like a puppet show, pulling strings designed to drive her exactly where she now found herself. "They want me dependent on you," she said, the realization forming even as she spoke it. "They want me to need your protection. Which means whatever they're really after, it requires you to be back in my world." Marcus pocketed his phone and moved to the diner's front windows again, scanning the fog-shrouded parking lot. "The question is why? What do you have that they need badly enough to spend months setting this up?" Maya opened her mouth to say she had nothing, that her life was an open book of poverty and single motherhood, but the words died on her lips, because that wasn't true, was it? She had something invaluable. She was Marcus Rodriguez's sister. She was blood family to one of the most feared enforcers in the Central Valley Charter of the Hells Angels. In the right circumstances, that connection could be worth more than money. "Jesus," she whispered, understanding flooding through her like poison. "They want leverage against you." Marcus turned from the window, and the look in his eyes confirmed her worst fears. "That's what I'm thinking. Someone needs me to do something or stop doing something, and they figured the best way to control me was through you and Sophia." Maya felt the ground shifting beneath her feet as the full scope of their situation became clear. This wasn't random violence or even calculated intimidation. This was strategy, long-term planning designed to turn her into a weapon against her own brother. The clean life she'd built hadn't been an escape. It had been preparation for a war she hadn't even known was coming. "So what do we do?" she asked, and heard in her own voice the complete abandonment of her old life. There was no more pretending, no more distance, no more careful anonymity. There was only forward motion into whatever darkness lay ahead. Marcus smiled, and for the first time since walking through the diner's doors, he looked genuinely pleased. "Now we disappear you properly and start hunting the hunters." The phrase, "disappear," you properly sent a chill through Maya's bones that had nothing to do with the November fog seeping through the diner's windows. She watched Marcus pull a second phone from his jacket, this one smaller, more expensive looking than the device he'd been using, and realized she was about to learn exactly how deep his world ran. "First lesson," he said, scrolling through contacts that appeared as numbers rather than names. "In my business, communication is everything. Who you talk to, when, and how they can trace it back to you. That phone you've been carrying? It's been broadcasting your location to anyone with the right equipment." Maya's hand instinctively moved to her back pocket, where her battered iPhone had been her lifeline to everything normal. Sophia's school, her work schedule, the few friends she'd managed to make in 5 years of careful distance from her past. "But I need it for—" "You need to stay alive more." Marcus finished dialing and held up a finger, his voice shifting into a tone she'd never heard before, crisp, military, utterly without warmth. "Bones." "Yeah, it's me. I need a babysitter job. Building 6, Eastside Gardens apartment complex. Female, 5 years old, currently with elderly caretaker." He paused, listening. Unknown timeline. Could be a week, could be longer. Full coverage, soft surveillance only. Maya found herself studying her brother as he spoke, seeing details she'd missed during the chaos of the past hour. The leather cut he wore wasn't just clothing, it was armor, literally and figuratively. The patches weren't decoration, they were credentials, each one telling a story about violence survived and loyalty proven. The way he held himself, even in conversation, suggested someone perpetually ready for attack. "Good. And Bones? This one's personal." Marcus ended the call and looked at Maya with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Sophia's covered. Former Force Recon, lost his own daughter to a drunk driver 3 years ago. He'll treat her like family." The casual mention of dead children and military backgrounds hit Maya like a physical blow. This was the world she was stepping into, a place where violence was so common that it served as professional qualification, where protection was measured in body counts and personal tragedy. "Second lesson," Marcus continued, already dialing another number. "Safe houses aren't houses, they're networks. People who owe favors, places that don't exist on any official records, transportation that can't be traced." His call connected, Tank, Rodriguez. I need the cabin. No, the other one. Yeah, that far out. Another pause. Could be messy. Full cleanup kit. Maya felt her knees go weak. Marcus, what exactly are you planning? He ended the call and fixed her with a stare that reminded her uncomfortably of their father. The same cold calculation, the same willingness to do whatever necessity demanded. I'm planning to keep you and Sophia alive. Everything else is negotiable. A new sound cut through the diner's silence, the low rumble of motorcycles approaching through the fog. Maya's blood froze, but Marcus actually relaxed, his hand moving away from whatever weapon he carried beneath his jacket. Third lesson, he said, moving toward the front door. Know the difference between threats and allies. Sometimes they sound exactly the same. 3 bikes materialized out of the fog like mechanical ghosts, their riders indistinguishable beneath helmets and leather. But Marcus stepped outside to meet them, and Maya realized this wasn't an attack. This was cavalry. The lead rider killed his engine and pulled off his helmet, revealing a face that belonged in a medieval war council, scarred, bearded, with eyes that had seen too much. He was older than Marcus by maybe a decade, and when he spoke, his voice carried absolute authority. Ice. The single word contained entire conversations. Heard you had some trouble. Someone's been running surveillance on my sister. Professional job, months of setup. Marcus's voice had shifted again, becoming harder, more formal. Maya realized she was witnessing a different version of her brother, not the protective family member, but the enforcer who'd earned his reputation. Local talent, or imported? The bearded man's question was directed at Marcus, but his eyes found Maya through the diner's windows, assessing her with clinical precision. Unknown. But they know family connections, they know schedules, and they're playing psychological games. This isn't random. The third rider, younger but carrying himself with similar predatory grace, spoke for the first time. Want us to canvass the area? See who's been asking questions? Maya watched this exchange with growing unease. These men weren't just offering help. They were mobilizing for war. Whatever had started with 3 drunk college kids was escalating into something that required military-level coordination. Do it, Marcus said. But soft inquiries only. Whoever's behind this has been patient for months. I don't want to spook them into acceleration. The bearded man nodded and looked directly at Maya. Ma'am, I'm Bishop, vice president of this charter. Your brother's family is our family. Anyone threatens you threatens all of us. And just like that, Maya understood the 4th lesson Marcus hadn't needed to speak aloud. In this world, protection came with obligations. She wasn't just accepting her brother's help. She was joining his tribe, with all the loyalty and violence that entailed. The weight of Bishop's words settled over Maya like a physical thing, dense, inescapable, carrying implications that stretched far beyond the fog-shrouded parking lot. She found herself nodding, a gesture that felt like signing a contract written in blood. Understood, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. What do you need from me? The question seemed to surprise all 3 men, as if they'd expected her to retreat into the diner and let them handle everything. But Maya had spent 5 years learning that survival required participation, not passivity. If she was truly joining this world, she needed to understand its rules. Bishop exchanged a look with Marcus that contained layers of communication she couldn't decode. Smart, he said finally. Ice, your sister's got stones. Always did, Marcus replied, and Maya caught something like pride in his voice. Maya, these men are going to ask you questions about the past few months, details you might think are meaningless. I need you to tell them everything. The younger rider stepped forward, pulling a small notebook from his jacket. Up close, Maya could see tattoos snaking up his neck. Not the decorative ink of rebellion, but the systematic markings of someone who'd earned each symbol through violence. Name's Reaper. I handle intelligence for the charter. His voice was surprisingly educated, carrying traces of an accent she couldn't place. When did you first notice you were being watched? Maya's mind raced backward through weeks of vague unease, moments that had seemed like paranoia, but now crystallized into pattern. 3 months ago, maybe 4, I started seeing the same car parked across from Sophia's school, dark sedan, tinted windows. but it was never there when I looked directly. Peripheral surveillance, Reaper noted, scribbling rapidly. Professional technique. What else? Phone calls that hung up when I answered. Wrong numbers that weren't wrong numbers. They always asked for me by name before realizing their mistake. Maya felt her chest tightening as the memories aligned themselves into something coherent and terrifying. Someone broke into our apartment but didn't take anything. They just moved things. Rearranged Sophia's toys, left my jewelry box open. Bishop's expression darkened. Psychological warfare. They wanted you off balance, paranoid, easier to manipulate when the time came. There's more, Maya continued, momentum carrying her forward despite the fear clawing at her throat. Mrs. Chen mentioned seeing a man in the hallway last week, said he claimed to be from the water department, but she never saw him actually check any meters. And yesterday, she paused, the memory sharp and strange. Yesterday, Sophia came home from school talking about a nice man who'd asked her about her mommy's work schedule. The silence that followed was absolute and deadly. Maya watched three hardened criminals process the implications of someone approaching her 5-year-old daughter, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. That changes things, Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying undertones that made Maya's skin crawl. They crossed the line when they involved Sophia directly. Reaper closed his notebook with a snap that sounded like a gunshot. I'll canvass the school, talk to teachers and staff. Someone's been gathering intelligence, and kids make easy targets for information. Careful, Bishop warned. Don't spook the civilian administrators. Last thing we need is police involvement at this stage. Maya found herself studying the dynamics between these men, the easy hierarchy and shared language of violence. This was Marcus's real family, she realized, not bound by blood but by something deeper and more dangerous. They moved together like a military unit, each man understanding his role without explicit instruction. What about me? Maya asked. What's my part in this? The three men looked at her with varying degrees of surprise and assessment. Finally, Marcus spoke. Your part is staying alive while we figure out who's pulling the strings. The cabin tank mentioned, it's 40 miles northeast, completely off-grid. You'll be safe there while we work. No. The word came out harder than Maya intended, surprising herself as much as the men around her. I'm not hiding while someone threatens my daughter. If this is about me being your sister, then I need to understand what that means, really understand it. Bishop laughed, a sound like gravel in a cement mixer. Ice, I like her. She's got the Rodriguez spine. But Marcus was shaking his head, his expression torn between admiration and frustration. Maya, you don't know what you're asking. Once you see how this world really works, there's no going back to soccer practice and parent-teacher conferences. There's already no going back, Maya replied, gesturing at the fog-shrouded highway where her old life had ended an hour ago. Someone made that choice for me when they started hunting my family. Now I need to learn how to hunt back. The admission hung in the air between them, and Maya felt another door slam shut inside her chest. Whatever came next, she would meet it with her eyes open and her hands ready to do whatever motherhood and survival demanded. The words had barely left Maya's mouth when she saw something shift in Marcus's expression, a flicker of recognition that chilled her more than the November fog seeping through the diner's windows. He was seeing her clearly for the first time in years, not as the sister who'd fled his world, but as someone who'd inherited the same capacity for calculated violence that ran in their bloodline. All right, he said slowly, and Maya heard finality in those two syllables. But we do this my way, completely. No questioning orders, no hesitation when I tell you to move, and no looking back once you cross this line. Bishop stepped closer, his scarred face serious. Ice, you sure about this? Bringing family into active operations? She's already in it whether we like it or not, Marcus replied. Someone made her a target specifically because she's my sister. At least this way, she's an asset instead of a liability. Maya felt a strange calm descend over her as the men began planning around her participation rather than her protection. This was what she'd been unconsciously preparing for during 5 years of hypervigilance, of teaching Sophia to recognize exits in every room, of keeping emergency cash hidden in 3 different locations. She'd thought she was building a life. Instead, she'd been training for war. "First thing," Reaper said, pulling out his phone, "we need to establish whether tonight was the endgame or just escalation. Maya, think carefully. Was there anything different about today? Any deviation from your normal routine that might have triggered accelerated surveillance?" The question forced Maya to replay the past 24 hours in forensic detail. "I called in sick to my morning shift," she said slowly. "First time in 6 months. Told Mel I had a doctor's appointment, but I actually went to Sophia's school to talk to her teacher about some behavioral changes." "What kind of changes?" Marcus's voice had gone sharp. Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks as she admitted her failure to protect her daughter. "She's been having nightmares, waking up talking about someone watching her through her bedroom window. I thought it was just kid imagination, but—" She gestured helplessly at the wreckage of her assumptions. "Jesus Christ," Bishop muttered. "They've been terrorizing a 5-year-old. The fury in his voice was matched by something arctic in Marcus's expression. Maya had seen that look before, years ago, when their father had come home drunk and raised his hand to their mother. It was the expression of someone calculating exactly how much pain they could inflict without killing their target. "Change of plans," Marcus said, his tone carrying absolute authority. "We're not waiting to identify the players. We're going to force their hand." "How?" Reaper asked, though his eager tone suggested he already approved. Marcus turned to Maya, and she saw her own reflection in his cold stare. Recognized the moment when Rodriguez. Blood decided that defense wasn't enough. "Maya's going back to her apartment tonight. Alone, visible, apparently vulnerable." "Marcus, no," Bishop started, but Maya cut him off. "Yes," she said, understanding immediately. "I'm bait." "You're a weapon," Marcus corrected. "There's a difference. Bait is passive. You're going to actively draw them out while we position for capture." Maya felt something unlock inside her chest, a door she'd kept sealed since the day she'd walked away from her family's world. Behind it lay instincts she'd inherited from generations of people who'd survived through violence. Reflexes trained by a childhood spent in Marcus's shadow, watching him transform from protective brother to lethal enforcer. "What about Sophia?" she asked, because motherhood still trumped everything else. "Sophia stays covered, completely invisible. They'll think she's still at Mrs. Chen's, but Bones will have already moved them to a secondary location." Marcus pulled out his phone again. "By the time our watchers realize what's happening, we'll have them surrounded." Reaper grinned, an expression that transformed his face into something predatory. Classic honey trap, but Maya needs to look convincing, scared, isolated, making mistakes. "That won't be hard," Maya admitted, feeling her pulse accelerate as the reality of what she was agreeing to sink in. "How long do you think it'll take them to move once I'm in position?" "Not long," Bishop said grimly. "If tonight was escalation, they're probably already committed to a timeline. Your little speech about learning to hunt back? They'll interpret that as desperation, emotional decision-making, perfect moment to make their play." Maya nodded, accepting the assessment of her psychological state even as she felt herself fragmenting into two distinct people, the terrified single mother and the Rodriguez daughter who'd been raised to fight. Both were real, both were necessary, and both would be tested before dawn. "When do we start?" she asked, and heard her father's voice in her own words. Marcus smiled, and Maya realized that for the first time in years, she was exactly where she belonged. The dark moment. Everything went wrong at 3:47 a.m. Maya sat in her darkened apartment, positioned exactly where Marcus had instructed, visible through the living room window, backlit by the television's glow, appearing to drowse fitfully on the couch. She'd been in position for 2 hours, every nerve screaming with hypervigilance while she forced her body to project exhausted vulnerability. The plan was simple: draw out whoever had been watching her, capture them, extract information about who was pulling the strings. Marcus and his team were positioned in 3 separate locations around the building, invisible and ready. Bones had confirmed Sophia's relocation to a secure house 40 miles away. Everything was covered, controlled, professional. Maya should have trusted her instincts when the silence stretched too long. Her phone buzzed, A text from an unknown number that made her blood turn to ice. Beautiful little girl. Such pretty brown eyes. Wave to mommy, Sophia. The attached photo showed her daughter sitting in what looked like the back of a van, tears streaming down her face, holding a newspaper with today's date. In the background, Maya could see part of a license plate, enough to confirm this wasn't the safe house Bones was supposed to have taken her to. Maya's carefully maintained facade shattered as she bolted upright, her training forgotten in the face of every parent's worst nightmare. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands, dialing Marcus's number while her mind reeled with the impossibility of what she was seeing. The call went straight to voicemail. She tried Bishop, dead air, Reaper. Nothing. The apartment suddenly felt like a tomb, and Maya realized with crystalline horror that she wasn't the hunter in this scenario. She was the mouse, and the trap had just sprung shut around everyone she'd trusted to keep Sophia safe. Another text arrived. Check your bedroom window. Maya's legs moved without conscious direction, carrying her down the hallway while her rational mind screamed warnings she couldn't process. Through Sophia's bedroom window, the one where her daughter had reported seeing someone watching, a laser dot danced across the far wall. As Maya watched, frozen, the red point traced letters in the darkness, HELP. The message was clear. Someone had Marcus and his team. Someone had been 3 steps ahead from the beginning, using Maya's desperation and her brother's protective instincts to walk them all into a carefully orchestrated ambush. Her phone rang, the same unknown number. Hello, Maya. The voice was calm, professional, utterly without emotion. I apologize for the deception, but your brother's reputation made subtle approaches impossible. Where is she? Maya's voice came out raw, barely human. Where's my daughter? Safe, for now. As are your brother and his associates. Consider them collateral for your cooperation. Maya sank onto Sophia's bed, surrounded by stuffed animals and drawings of princess castles, while her world collapsed around her in real time. What do you want? A conversation. Face to face. No weapons, no backup. You have something that belongs to my employer, and we need to discuss terms for its return. I don't know what you're talking about. But even as Maya said it, memory tugged at the edge of consciousness. Something forgotten, something from the chaos of leaving Marcus's world 5 years ago. I think you do. The storage unit in Riverside, registered under Maria Santos. Your mother's maiden name, wasn't it? Very sentimental. Maya's knees buckled. She'd forgotten about the storage unit, a last-minute decision during her desperate flight from everything connected to the Rodriguez name. She'd thrown everything from her old apartment into it. Furniture, clothing, boxes of documents she'd never bothered to sort through. 5 years of monthly payments automatically deducted from her checking account, so routine she'd stopped noticing them. 1 hour, the voice continued. Riverside Storage, Unit 247. Come alone, bring the contents of Safety Deposit Box 11247 from the items you stored. Your daughter's continued well-being depends on your punctuality. The line went dead. Maya sat in the darkness of her daughter's room, surrounded by the debris of every assumption she'd built her new life on. Marcus wasn't coming to save her. His network had been compromised, possibly from the beginning. Whatever she'd inadvertently stolen 5 years ago had finally caught up with her. And the price for her ignorance was everyone she loved. She thought about calling the police, but the laser sight still traced patterns across Sophia's wall, a reminder that she was being watched, that any deviation from instructions would have immediate consequences. For the first time since walking away from her family's world, Maya Rodriguez was completely alone, facing an enemy who'd proven they could outthink, outmaneuver, and outfight everyone she'd counted on for protection. The only question now was whether 5 years of hiding had made her weak enough to break, or if being a mother had made her dangerous enough to win. Maya stood slowly from Sophia's bed, her legs unsteady but her mind beginning to crystallize into something sharp and focused. The laser sight continued its lazy dance across the wall, but she no longer saw it as a threat. It was information. Whoever was watching her wanted her to know they were there, which meant they needed her functional, not paralyzed with terror. The drive to Riverside took 38 minutes through empty pre-dawn streets. Maya's hands steady on the wheel, despite the chaos in her chest. She'd grabbed her emergency cash and the spare key to the storage unit from its hiding place taped under her kitchen sink, a precaution she'd taken so long ago she'd almost forgotten its purpose. Now that forgotten paranoia might be the only thing keeping her daughter alive. Riverside Storage sat like a concrete fortress under harsh sodium lights, rows of identical orange doors stretching into darkness. Unit 247 was in the back corner, isolated from the main office and any potential witnesses. Maya parked under a broken streetlight and walked the 100 yards carrying nothing but her keys and phone, hyper-aware of the silence pressing against her eardrums. The storage unit rolled open with a metallic shriek that seemed to echo forever. Maya fumbled for the light switch, and fluorescent tubes flickered to life, revealing 5 years of her abandoned past stacked floor to ceiling. Furniture she'd forgotten she owned. Boxes labeled in her younger self's handwriting, bags of clothing that belonged to a woman who'd believed escape was possible. She found the safety deposit box contents in a manila envelope wedged between her old dresser and a stack of textbooks from the college degree she'd never finished. Maya had grabbed it during her final frantic hour of packing, just another piece of paperwork in the hurricane of leaving everything behind. She'd never even looked inside. Now, standing under the harsh light with her daughter's life hanging in the balance, Maya tore open the envelope with shaking fingers. The documents inside made no immediate sense. Bank routing numbers, shipping manifests, what looked like encoded communications between various businesses. But as Maya studied them more carefully, patterns began to emerge. Names she recognized from Marcus's world, dates that corresponded to major territorial disputes between rival clubs, financial records that painted a picture of money laundering on a massive scale. And at the bottom of the stack, a USB drive wrapped in plastic with a note in handwriting she didn't recognize. Insurance policy. Use if necessary. J. Maya stared at the drive, understanding flooding through her like ice water. This wasn't random contraband she'd accidentally stolen. This was someone's deliberate insurance against betrayal hidden in her belongings, because no one would think to look for it with Marcus Rodriguez's civilian sister. Someone had used her as an unwitting safety deposit box, and now that someone was dead or disappeared, leaving her holding evidence that could destroy whoever was named in those files. 5 years, she whispered to the empty storage unit. 5 years I've been carrying this around. Her phone buzzed with another text parking lot. Now, Maya walked back through the maze of storage units with the envelope clutched against her chest, her mind racing through implications and possibilities. Whoever wanted this information had the resources to compromise Marcus's entire network, which meant they were either law enforcement or criminal organization with serious reach. Either way, handing over the evidence would eliminate the only leverage she had, but refusing meant Sophia would pay the price for her defiance. The parking lot appeared empty except for her Honda, but Maya could feel eyes watching from the darkness beyond the fence line. She stopped next to her car and waited, every muscle coiled for movement. A figure emerged from behind a panel van she hadn't noticed before. Medium height, unremarkable features, the kind of person who could disappear in any crowd. When he spoke, Maya recognized the voice from the phone calls. Ms. Rodriguez. Thank you for being punctual. Where's my daughter? Close by and unharmed. The documents? Maya held up the envelope but didn't extend it toward him. First I see Sophia. First I know Marcus is alive. Then we talk terms. The man smiled, an expression that never reached his eyes. You're not in a position to negotiate. Yes, I am. Maya surprised herself with the steadiness of her voice. Because what's in this envelope is worth more than my daughter's life to you. Worth more than Marcus and his entire crew. Otherwise you would have just killed us all and taken it. She saw recognition flicker across the man's face, the moment when he realized she'd understood the true stakes of their exchange. Whatever was on that USB drive was valuable enough that he needed her cooperation, not just her compliance. There are names in here, Maya continued. her confidence growing as she read his micro-expressions, names that would be very interested to know someone's been collecting evidence against them, people who would pay handsomely to make that evidence disappear, along with whoever gathered it. The man's smile faded completely, and Maya saw her first glimpse of the predator beneath his unremarkable surface. "Careful, Ms. Rodriguez. You're beginning to sound like your brother." "Good," Maya replied, feeling something ancient and dangerous unfurling in her chest. "Because that means I'm finally understanding exactly who I've always been." The man's hand moved toward his jacket, but Maya was already stepping backward, using her car as cover. The small parking lot suddenly felt like a chessboard, and she was beginning to understand the rules. "The thing is," Maya said, keeping her voice steady while her mind raced through possibilities, "I made copies before I came here. Digital copies, stored in 3 different cloud accounts, set to auto-send to every major news outlet and federal agency if I don't check in every 12 hours. It was a complete lie, but Maya delivered it with the same calm certainty she'd learned watching Marcus negotiate, with suppliers who thought they could shortchange the club. The man's micro-expression told her the bluff was working, doubt flickering across his features like a crack in armor. "You're lying." "Maybe. But are you willing to bet your employer's life on it?" Maya shifted her weight, ready to move. "Because if something happens to me or my family, tomorrow morning the FBI is going to have a very interesting breakfast reading." The standoff stretched between them, punctuated only by the distant hum of highway traffic. Maya could feel sweat beading at her hairline despite the November chill, but her hands remained steady. 5 years of hypervigilance had taught her to function while terrified, and being a mother had taught her that some things were worth any risk. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call. The man gestured for her to answer it, but keep it on speaker. "Maya?" Marcus's voice, tight with pain but unmistakably alive. Relief flooded through her so intensely she had to lean against the car for support. "I'm here. Listen to me carefully. These people aren't just after the files, they're cleaning house. Everyone who might have seen what's on that drive, everyone connected to the original theft. We're not collateral, we're witnesses scheduled for elimination." The man across from Maya tensed, clearly unhappy with how much information Marcus was sharing. But Maya was already processing the implications, her mind shifting into the strategic thinking that had been dormant for 5 years. "How many of them?" she asked, not specifying whether she meant captors or prisoners. 4 visible. Unknown backup. Standard elimination protocol suggests they're planning to make this look like a club war gone wrong. Very neat, very tidy. Maya understood immediately. Kill everyone connected to the evidence. Stage it as motorcycle gang violence. Let local law enforcement write it off as criminals eliminating each other. Clean and simple, no loose threads. Except now Maya had introduced complications into their timeline. "The beautiful part," she said, looking directly at the man across from her, "is that my insurance policy doesn't care who pulls the trigger. Federal agencies don't investigate motives when they're handed trafficking routes and money laundering schemes. They just start making arrests." "You're buying time," the man said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "Eventually, you'll have to choose between the evidence and your family." "No," Maya replied, feeling the last of her old fear evaporate like morning fog. "I'm changing the rules of the game." She pulled out her phone and began dialing 911, watching the man's expression shift from confidence to alarm. "The thing about being a Rodriguez is that we don't negotiate with terrorists. We eliminate them." "Stop." His hand was definitely on a weapon now. Maya hit send and tossed the phone onto the ground between them, speaker still active. 911, what's your emergency?" "Shots fired at Riverside Storage, multiple gunmen. Officer needs assistance," Maya called out clearly, then crushed the phone under her heel before the operator could respond. The parking lot erupted into motion. The man lunged toward Maya, but she was already moving, using 5 years of learned paranoia to put distance and obstacles between them. In the distance, she could hear engines starting. Backup that had been waiting in the darkness now forced into premature action by the approaching sirens. Maya reached her Honda and gunned the engine, not fleeing but repositioning. She had maybe 6 minutes before actual police arrived, and she intended to use every second. The envelope of documents went into her jacket, and she grabbed the emergency prepaid phone from under her passenger seat. Another forgotten precaution that was about to save her life. Speed dial connected her to Bones's real number, the one even Marcus didn't know about. It's Maya. Emergency Protocol 7, copy. Sophia's secure. What's your position? Riverside storage, about to become a crime scene. I need extraction, and I need our people to vanish before local law arrives. Roger. 2 minutes out. Maya smiled grimly as she watched the man from the parking lot coordinating with vehicles she could now see emerging from concealment around the storage facility. They'd planned for negotiation or elimination, but they hadn't planned for controlled chaos with federal response incoming. For the first time in 5 years, Maya Rodriguez wasn't running from her family's world. She was using it as a weapon, and the blade was sharp enough to cut through anyone who threatened her daughter. The war was just beginning, but she was finally ready to fight it. The extraction point was a truck stop 3 miles east of the storage facility, chosen for its multiple exit routes and the kind of clientele that minded their own business. Maya arrived first, her hands still steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system like electricity. She parked between 2 semis and waited, the envelope of documents pressed against her ribs like a promise of violence. Bones appeared out of the pre-dawn darkness riding a stripped-down Harley, his club colors hidden beneath a black leather jacket. Behind him came 2 more bikes, Reaper and a prospect Maya didn't recognize, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else than cleaning up Rodriguez family business at 5 in the morning. Where's Marcus? Maya asked as Bones cut his engine. Alive. Pissed off. Currently zip-tied in the back of a panel van about 2 miles from where you just turned everything to shit. Bones pulled off his helmet, revealing a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and disappointment. You want to tell me what you were thinking back there? Maya held up the envelope. I was thinking that whoever wants this badly enough to grab Marcus and Sophia has been planning this for a long time. Which means they know exactly how we think, how we operate, what moves we'll make. She looked between the 3 bikers, seeing her brother's world through different eyes now. They've been watching us, studying us, waiting for the perfect moment to spring their trap. So, you decided to burn everything down instead of playing their game, Reaper said. It wasn't quite a question. I decided to remind them that Rodriguez women don't negotiate from positions of weakness. Maya felt something settling into place in her chest, something that had been broken and scattered, for 5 years finally reassembling itself. The police response gives us maybe 20 minutes before they have to cut Marcus loose or risk federal attention. That's our window. Bones studied her with eyes that had seen 30 years of club warfare. And after that? When they regroup, when they come for all of us with everything they've got? Maya pulled out the USB drive, holding it up in the fluorescent glow of the truck stop lights. After that, we finish what someone else started 5 years ago. We find out who's been collecting evidence on whom, and we use it to burn their entire operation to the ground. The prospect shifted nervously on his bike. Boss, maybe we should think about this. These people took down our whole security network without breaking a sweat. They knew where to find Marcus, knew about the safe houses, knew exactly which buttons to push. Which means they have inside information, Maya said, the pieces finally clicking into place in her mind. Someone in our world has been feeding them intelligence for months, maybe years. Someone who knew about my storage unit, who knew about Marcus's protective instincts, who knew exactly how to manipulate both of us into walking into their trap. Reaper's expression darkened. You're talking about a rat in the club. I'm talking about someone who's been playing a long game while we were focused on short-term survival. Maya tucked the drive back into her jacket, feeling its weight like a loaded gun. But here's what they didn't count on. I'm not the same person who ran away 5 years ago. I'm not the terrified girl who just wanted to disappear. Bones's phone buzzed with an incoming text. He glanced at it, then looked up with something that might have been respect. Marcus is loose, says to tell you that controlled chaos is a Rodriguez family specialty, and he's proud of you for remembering your training. Maya felt tears threaten at the corners of her eyes, but her voice remained steady. Where's Sophia? Safe house in Fresno. Real safe house this time. guarded by people who've bled for this club. Bones's expression softened fractionally. She's scared but unharmed, keeps asking when her mom is coming home. The weight of everything, 5 years of hiding, the night's revelations, the choice she was about to make, settled on Maya's shoulders like a familiar burden. She looked around at the three men watching her, representatives of a world she'd sworn she'd never return to, and realized she was already back. Had been back the moment she'd chosen to fight instead of flee. "I need to see what's on this drive," she said finally. "I need to understand exactly what we're up against, who we can trust, and how deep this conspiracy goes." "And then?" Bones asked. Maya thought about Sophia's drawings on the refrigerator, about Marcus bleeding in a panel van because he'd tried to protect her, about 5 years of looking over her shoulder and jumping at shadows. She thought about the man in the parking lot who'd smiled while threatening her daughter, and about whoever had orchestrated this entire nightmare from behind the scenes. "Then we hunt them down and make them pay for every moment of fear they've cost my family." Maya met each of their eyes in turn, seeing recognition there, the acknowledgement of a predator revealing its true nature. The Rodriguez family is done running. Time to remind people why that name used to mean something in this world. The safe house turned out to be a fortified compound hidden in the industrial district of Fresno, surrounded by legitimate businesses that provided perfect cover for illegitimate activities. Maya followed Bones's Harley through a maze of warehouses and auto shops, her Honda looking distinctly out of place among the customized bikes parked in the shadows. Inside, the contrast was striking. What appeared to be a rundown auto repair shop from the outside revealed itself as a sophisticated operations center, complete with encrypted communications equipment, weapon storage, and multiple escape routes. Marcus sat at a steel table in the center of it all, his left arm in a makeshift sling, but his eyes sharp with the familiar intensity that had made him legendary in their world. "Little sister," he said as she walked in, and Maya heard 5 years of worry and regret compressed into those two words. "Big brother," she replied, matching his tone exactly. Some conversations could wait. Right now, they had work to do. The laptop was military grade, borrowed from contacts who specialized in digital warfare. Maya inserted the USB drive with hands that no longer trembled, watching as file directories populated the screen like evidence of crimes she'd carried unknowingly for half a decade. What she found exceeded her worst expectations. "Jesus Christ," Bones whispered, reading over her shoulder. "This isn't just money laundering. This is a complete organizational chart." The files contained everything: financial records linking legitimate businesses to drug trafficking routes, communications between corrupt law enforcement and criminal organizations, detailed profiles of every major player in the California underworld. But it was the metadata that made Maya's blood run cold. "Look at the dates," she said, pointing to the timestamp on the most recent files. "This was updated 3 weeks ago. Someone's been maintaining this database, adding new information, tracking movements and relationships in real time." Marcus leaned forward despite the obvious pain the movement caused. "That's not possible. This drive came from Jimmy Torino's safe house, and Jimmy's been dead for 2 years. Which means someone else had access to his files. Someone who's been using his intelligence network to map our entire world." Maya scrolled through folder after folder, seeing the scope of surveillance that had been conducted on everyone from club presidents to street-level dealers. "They know everything about everyone." Reaper pointed at a subfolder labeled Priority Targets. "Open that one." Maya clicked, and her own face stared back at her from a detailed surveillance profile. Photos of her leaving the diner, picking Sophia up from school, grocery shopping. Months of documentation proving she'd never truly escaped their attention. But it was the annotation at the bottom that made her stomach drop. Leverage, high value. Relationship to Ice Rodriguez confirmed. Recommend activation when convenient. "They've been watching me for over a year," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This whole thing, the college kids at the diner, the timing, everything, it was orchestrated." Marcus was studying his own file, his expression growing darker with each page. "They know about the Tijuana connection, the Port of Long Beach operation, even the thing in Vegas last year that nobody was supposed to know about. He looked up, meeting Maya's eyes. This level of intelligence doesn't come from watching and listening. This comes from someone on the inside. Bones had gone completely still, his face pale beneath his weathered features. Maya, scroll back to that organizational chart. She navigated back to the main directory, pulling up the detailed network map that showed connections between various criminal enterprises, law enforcement contacts, and financial institutions. At the center of it all was a name that made everything click into place with horrible clarity. Detective Raymond Santos, LAPD Gang Intelligence Unit, Maya read aloud. Primary contact for Operation Clearwater. Ray Santos, Marcus said slowly. He's been our contact in LAPD for 3 years. Feed him information about rival clubs. He makes sure our legitimate businesses don't get hassled by patrol units. He's also been feeding information the other direction, Maya realized, the full scope of the betrayal becoming clear. Every piece of intelligence we gave him, every detail about club operations, territory disputes, financial arrangements, he's been building this database and selling access to the highest bidder. The room fell silent except for the hum of electronics and the distant sound of traffic. Maya stared at the screen, understanding that what she was looking at represented years of systematic intelligence gathering designed to map and eventually control or eliminate the entire California criminal underground. This isn't just about us, she said finally. Whoever's behind this has been positioning themselves to take over everything. They've got dirt on every player, leverage on every operation, evidence to destroy anyone who won't cooperate. Marcus struggled to his feet, his good hand clenched into a fist. Then we burn it all down before they can use it. Maya looked around the room at the faces of men who'd spent their lives fighting for territory, for respect, for the right to exist outside society's rules. But this was different. This was about survival itself. No, she said, feeling the last piece of her old life falling away. We use it better than they did. Marcus stared at his sister like she'd grown a second head. Maya, what the hell are you talking about? I'm talking about fighting smart instead of fighting angry. Maya's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up Detective Santos's contact list. Look at this. He's not just feeding information to one buyer, he's got at least 6 different clients all thinking they're getting exclusive intelligence. The screen revealed a web of competing interests. A Mexican cartel looking to expand into California territory. A Chinese trafficking syndicate mapping port operations. What appeared to be federal agents building cases against multiple targets simultaneously, and at least 2 private security firms with connections to corporate interests. They're all playing against each other, Reaper said, understanding dawning in his voice. Santos has been selling the same information to enemies. Better than that, Maya said, scrolling deeper into the communications logs. He's been selling modified information. Look at these reports about our Long Beach operations. The dates are shifted by 2 weeks, the quantities are inflated by 30%, and the personnel lists include 3 people who've been dead for 6 months. Bones leaned over the laptop, squinting at the data. Son of a bitch has been feeding everyone false intelligence while keeping the real information for himself. Maya felt pieces clicking into place with crystalline clarity, not for himself, for whoever's running Operation Clearwater. She pulled up another directory, this one protected by additional encryption that was already beginning to crack under the laptop's assault. Santos is middle management. Someone above him has been orchestrating this entire network. The encryption broke, and a new file structure appeared. At the top level sat a single document titled Consolidation Timeline to Phase 3. Marcus read over her shoulder, his breathing growing labored with anger. Phase 1, Intelligence Gathering and Network Mapping. Phase 2, Elimination of Non-Cooperative Elements. Phase 3, Asset Absorption and Territorial Reorganization. His voice dropped to a whisper. They're planning to take over everything. Every operation, every territory, every revenue stream. When? Maya asked, scrolling through the timeline. Next month, he said. Starting with the clubs that refuse to cooperate, ending with a complete restructuring of criminal enterprise on the West Coast under centralized management. Maya stared at the screen, understanding finally why they'd moved against her family now. We weren't targets for elimination. We were obstacles to recruitment. They wanted Marcus alive but controllable, and they needed leverage to make that happen. Sophia, Bones said grimly. They grab your daughter, force your cooperation, use that to control Marcus. Except I didn't cooperate, Maya said, feeling something cold and familiar settling into her chest. I introduced chaos into their careful timeline, and now they have to accelerate their plans or risk everything unraveling. The laptop chimed with an incoming message. Maya opened it to find a video file timestamped 15 minutes ago. The screen showed Sophia sitting in what appeared to be a comfortable living room, drawing pictures while an older woman prepared lunch in the background. She's not in danger, Marcus said, relief evident in his voice. That's Maria Santos's house in Riverside. Ray's mother has been watching kids for the neighborhood for 30 years. Maya felt the world shift beneath her feet. Santos has my daughter. Santos has been protecting your daughter, came a voice from behind them. They turned to see Detective Raymond Santos himself standing in the doorway, his service weapon holstered but visible, his hands raised to show he wasn't reaching for it. Easy, he said as 4 weapons immediately trained on him. I'm not here for a firefight. I'm here because my cover just got blown and we have maybe 20 minutes before some very dangerous people realize I've been playing them for 3 years. Marcus's voice was deadly quiet. You've got 30 seconds to explain before I put a bullet in your skull. Santos stepped slowly into the room, keeping his hands visible. Operation Clearwater is real, but it's not what you think. It's a federal task force designed to infiltrate and dismantle the organization that's been trying to consolidate criminal operations across 7 states. I've been undercover for 3 years, feeding them information while gathering evidence of their activities. Bullshit, Reaper snarled. You've been selling intel to half the criminals in California. I've been selling carefully crafted false intelligence while documenting every transaction, every contact, every crime they've committed in pursuit of their consolidation plan. Santos looked directly at Maya. Including the planned kidnapping of your daughter and the elimination of your brother. Moving Sophia to my mother's house was the only way I could ensure her safety when they activated tonight's operation. Maya felt her world shifting again, but this time towards something that might be hope. Then who's been running the consolidation? Santos smiled grimly. That's what we're about to find out, because whoever's behind this just lost their inside man, and they're about to discover that 3 years of careful planning has been feeding evidence directly to federal prosecutors. He gestured toward the laptop. Everything on that drive? It's all admissible in court now, thanks to your little stunt at the storage facility. Maya looked around the room at the faces of men who'd spent their lives distrusting authority, seeing the same calculation in their eyes that she felt in her chest. Trust a cop, or fight a war they couldn't win. What do you need from us? She asked. The real confrontation was just beginning. Santos pulled out his phone, checking the time with the practiced efficiency of someone accustomed to operating on borrowed moments. The consolidation timeline just accelerated. When I don't report in within the next 15 minutes, they'll know something's gone wrong. Maya stared at the screen full of evidence that represented 3 years of federal investigation, understanding beginning to crystallize like ice in her veins. You need someone to deliver you to them, someone they'll believe captured you. Maya, no, Marcus said immediately, reading her expression. Whatever you're thinking, I'm thinking that Detective Santos needs to maintain his cover long enough to identify the real leadership, and the only way that happens is if someone they trust delivers him. Maya's voice carried the weight of a decision already made. Someone they've been watching for over a year, someone whose psychological profile says she'll do anything to protect her daughter. Santos nodded slowly. They'll want to debrief me personally, face to face. It's the only way to find out who's really running this operation. It's also the only way to get yourself killed, Bones pointed out. You walk into their stronghold, even with Maya as bait, you might not walk back out. Maya turned away from the laptop, looking at her brother's battered face at men who'd risked everything to help her family tonight. What happens to Sophia if we don't end this? What happens when they regroup, when they come at us with everything they've got? Marcus struggled to his feet, his injured arm making the movement awkward. We disappear. New identities. Fresh start somewhere they'll never find us. Like we did 5 years ago? Maya's laugh held no humor. They found me in Bakersfield, Marcus. They've been watching me for over a year. There is no hiding from people with this kind of reach and resources. She moved to a window overlooking the industrial district, seeing her reflection ghost-like against the darkness outside. But there is ending it. Permanently. The risk, Santos began. The risk is mine to take. Maya turned back to face them all, feeling the last vestiges of the person she'd tried to become over the past 5 years falling away like shed skin. Sophia doesn't get to grow up looking over her shoulder the way I did. She doesn't get to spend her life wondering when the violence is going to catch up with her family. Marcus was studying her with an expression she remembered from childhood, the look he got when he recognized something of himself in her actions. What exactly are you proposing? Maya moved back to the laptop, scrolling through Santos's communication logs until she found what she needed. I delivered Detective Santos to whoever's running this operation, claiming I captured him after he revealed himself trying to protect my daughter. I play the grieving mother who'll do anything for revenge. They'll never believe you overpowered a cop, Reaper objected. They'll believe I got lucky when he tried to convince me to trust him. They'll believe I chose family over law enforcement. Maya pulled up Santos's most recent message thread, especially when I bring them proof that he's been feeding false information to their competitors. Santos was already shaking his head. Even if they buy it, the moment they start questioning me seriously, they won't get the chance. Maya's voice carried a finality that made everyone in the room go still. Because while they're focused on you, I'll be documenting everything. Names, faces, locations, operational details. And when federal agents raid the meeting 20 minutes later, we'll have everything we need to destroy their entire network. The silence stretched long enough for Maya to hear her own heartbeat. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice rough with emotion. You're talking about wearing a wire into a room full of people who kill for a living. I'm talking about ending this tonight, permanently. So my daughter never has to live in this world. Maya met his eyes, seeing recognition there of the decision she'd already made. You taught me that sometimes the only way out is through, that sometimes you have to risk everything to protect what matters most. Bones cleared his throat. Maya, if something goes wrong, Sophia still has her uncle and a club full of people who've proven they'll bleed for family. Maya moved to Marcus, placing her hand on his uninjured shoulder. But if we don't take this chance, she'll spend her whole life running from people who have unlimited resources and infinite patience. Santos was studying her with something that might have been respect. You understand what you're asking me to let you do? I'm not asking. Maya turned back to the laptop, beginning to compose a message that would set everything in motion. I'm telling you what's going to happen. The only question is whether you help me do it right or whether I improvise and hope for the best. Marcus moved beside her, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of absolute commitment. Then we do it right, together, the way Rodriguez family has always handled their problems. Maya began typing, each keystroke feeling like a step deeper into the darkness she'd spent 5 years trying to escape. But for Sophia's future, for the chance to finally end this nightmare, it was a sacrifice she could live with, if she survived the next few hours to see that future at all. The warehouse fell silent except for the soft clicking of Maya's fingers on the keyboard and the distant hum of machinery. She composed the message with careful precision, each word designed to trigger the exact response they needed. Santos compromised. Have him secured, ready to deal. Family first. She hit send and leaned back in her chair, feeling the weight of what she'd just set in motion. Within seconds, her phone buzzed with a response containing coordinates to a location in the industrial district, 30 minutes away. It's done, she said quietly. Marcus moved closer, reading the address over her shoulder. That's the old Kellerman steel plant. Been abandoned for 6 months. He looked up at Santos. You know the place? Santos nodded grimly. We've had it under surveillance. Perfect location for what they do. Multiple exit routes, isolated, acoustically insulated. He checked his service weapon, ensuring the chamber was loaded. Maya, once we're inside, you need to stay close, but not too close. These people will kill you without hesitation if they suspect deception. Maya stood, testing the small recording device Santos had taped beneath her shirt collar. The wire was nearly invisible, its transmission range limited, but sufficient for the federal agents who would be positioned outside the facility. How long do we need to keep them talking? 5 minutes minimum for positive identification of leadership. 10 minutes to document enough criminal conspiracy to support prosecution. Santos's voice carried the weight of someone who'd spent 3 years preparing for this moment. After that, you get out however you can. Bones stepped forward, his weathered face creased with concern. Maya, you don't have to do this. There are other ways. No, she said, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. There aren't, not anymore. She looked around the room at faces that had become family over the course of a single violent night. I spent 5 years pretending I could escape this world, pretending Sophia and I could build something clean and safe away from all this. She gestured at the laptop full of evidence. But they never stopped watching. They never stopped planning. The only way to truly protect her is to end their ability to threaten anyone. Marcus struggled into a leather jacket, wincing as the movement jarred his injured arm. I'm coming with you. Like hell you are. Maya's response was immediate and non-negotiable. You can barely stand, and if they see you, they'll know something's wrong. This has to look like I'm acting alone. Maya? Marcus. Her voice softened, and for a moment she sounded like the sister who used to patch his cuts and argue with him about homework. I need you here, coordinating with the federal team. I need to know that if something goes wrong, someone I trust is managing the response. Santos checked his watch again. We need to move. The longer we delay, the more suspicious they'll become. Maya picked up her purse, checking to ensure she had everything she needed. The flash drive containing the intelligence files, her identification, and a small .22 caliber pistol Marcus had insisted she carry. The weight of the gun felt foreign against her hip, a reminder of how far she'd traveled from the person she'd been when her shift started. Remember, Santos said as they moved toward the door, you're angry, you were scared, and you want revenge for them threatening your daughter. Let that emotion drive your performance, but don't let it cloud your judgment. Maya nodded, then turned back to her brother one final time. Marcus stood surrounded by his club brothers, his face pale from pain and loss of blood, but his eyes burning with the same fierce protectiveness that had defined their relationship since childhood. Take care of Sophia if this goes bad, she said simply. It won't go bad, he replied, but they both knew he was speaking hope rather than certainty. As they walked toward Santos's unmarked police vehicle, Maya felt the November fog pressing against her skin like cold fingers, reminding her of how the night had started, with drunk college kids and spilled coffee and the simple desire to finish her shift and go home to her daughter. Now she was walking voluntarily into the heart of a criminal conspiracy that had been mapping her life for over a year, wearing a wire and carrying evidence that could destroy an organization spanning multiple states. The transformation felt surreal, like watching someone else's life unfold in terrible slow motion. Santos started the engine, the sound unnaturally loud in the warehouse district's industrial quiet. Maya, once we're inside, remember that these people have been planning this consolidation for years. They're not street criminals. They're organized, intelligent, and utterly ruthless. She stared through the windshield at the fog-shrouded streets ahead, thinking about Sophia sleeping safely in a stranger's house, trusting that her mother would somehow make everything right. So am I, Maya said quietly. Tonight, so am I. The Kellerman steel plant rose from the fog like a monument to industrial decay, its broken windows reflecting Santos's headlights in fractured patterns. Maya felt her heartbeat steady into the rhythm she remembered from childhood, the calm that came before violence, the stillness that preceded storms. Federal team is in position, Santos murmured, touching his earpiece one final time before removing it. Remember, 5 minutes minimum. Maya checked the recording device beneath her collar, then stepped out of the vehicle. The fog muffled their footsteps as they approached the main entrance, where two men in expensive suits waited beside a black SUV. Neither looked like street criminals. They carried themselves with the polished confidence of corporate executives who happen to traffic in violence. Maya Rodriguez, the taller one said, his voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't place. I'm disappointed it took threatening your daughter to bring you to us. Maya let rage color her voice, drawing on genuine fury that had been building all night. You made a mistake involving my family. Detective Santos here was kind enough to explain exactly how big a mistake. She shoved Santos forward, noting how he stumbled convincingly. Inside, the second man said, scanning the industrial district with professional paranoia. Mr. Chen is waiting. The name meant nothing to Maya, but she filed it away as they were escorted through corridors that smelled of rust and abandoned machinery. The recording device felt hot against her skin, documenting every word, every face, every detail that would be needed to dismantle this network permanently. They reached what had once been a supervisor's office, now fitted with expensive furniture that looked grotesquely out of place against the industrial decay. Behind a mahogany desk sat an Asian man in his 50s, his bearing suggesting military background despite his civilian clothes. Ms. Rodriguez, he said, rising with courteous formality, I understand you've brought us a gift. Maya forced herself to look at Santos with contempt rather than concern. He tried to convince me he was protecting my daughter, said he could offer federal protection in exchange for cooperation. She laughed harshly. Like I'd trust the government after they spent years ignoring what happened to my family. Chen studied Santos with the calculating gaze of someone accustomed to extracting truth through pain. Detective Raymond Santos, you've been feeding our organization intelligence for 3 years. Suddenly developing a conscience? Santos played his part perfectly, letting fear creep into his voice. The operation got too big, too visible. Federal attention was increasing, and I needed to protect my position. By warning our targets? The taller man from outside stepped forward, his hand moving to the pistol beneath his jacket. By compromising years of careful planning? Maya checked her mental timer. 3 minutes since they'd entered the building. She needed to keep them talking, needed Chen to reveal more about the organization's structure. He told me about the consolidation plan. Said you've been targeting motorcycle clubs, drug operations, everything from Seattle to San Diego. Chen's expression shifted, annoyance replacing courtesy. Detective Santos shared classified operational details with a civilian. How unfortunate for him. He moved around the desk, approaching Maya with predatory grace. What exactly did he tell you about our timeline? Enough to know that my brother's club was never the real target. You wanted Marcus alive and controllable. You wanted to use him to absorb the Angel's operations into your network. Maya let genuine understanding fuel her words, but you needed leverage to make that happen. Your daughter, Chen confirmed, his voice carrying the casual tone of someone discussing weather rather than kidnapping. A powerful motivational tool. Children make excellent insurance policies for parental cooperation. 5 minutes. Maya felt the wire capturing every word of Chen's confession, documenting federal crimes that would ensure decades of imprisonment. But she needed more. Needed to understand the full scope of their operation before the raid began. How many other families have you used this way? She asked, stepping closer to Chen despite every instinct screaming at her to run. Chen smiled with genuine pride. 43 successful integrations over 18 months. We identify key figures in existing criminal organizations, determine their emotional vulnerabilities, then apply precise pressure to ensure cooperation. He gestured toward Santos. Detective Santos provided intelligence that made this process remarkably efficient. Until tonight, Maya said, letting satisfaction creep into her voice. Until he got careless and exposed himself trying to play hero. Chen nodded, then drew a pistol with fluid motion. Until tonight. Unfortunately, Detective Santos has outlived his usefulness, and you've served your purpose as well. Maya heard the distant sound of vehicles approaching at high speed, federal agents moving into position for the raid. But Chen was raising his weapon, his finger tightening on the trigger, and Maya realized with crystalline clarity that 5 minutes might not be enough time after all. She thought of Sophia, sleeping safely miles away, trusting that her mother would somehow make everything right. Maya had spent 5 years running from the violence that had shaped her childhood, but tonight, she finally understood what Marcus had always known. Sometimes the only way to protect the innocent was to embrace the darkness completely. The office door exploded inward as federal agents breached the building, but Maya was already moving, her hand finding the .22 at her hip as the world erupted into chaos around her. Chapter 18, The New Beginning. The gunshot echoed through the steel plant like thunder, but it was Chen's weapon that clattered to the concrete floor. Maya's .22 had found its mark with deadly precision, not the kill shot Marcus would have taken, but center mass, dropping Chen before he could fire. The federal agents flooding the room moved with practiced efficiency, securing weapons and suspects while Maya stood frozen, her smoking pistol still raised. "It's over," Santos said softly, his hand gently lowering her weapon. "Maya, it's over." But she couldn't stop shaking. The adrenaline that had carried her through the night was draining away, leaving her hollow and trembling as the reality of what she'd done settled into her bones. She'd pulled the trigger. After 5 years of running from violence, she'd chosen it when Sophia's future hung in the balance. 6 months later, Maya stood in the kitchen of their new apartment in Sacramento, morning sunlight streaming through windows that no longer needed to be watched. The federal case had dismantled Chen's organization completely. 43 families freed from their surveillance network, dozens of arrests, and enough evidence to keep the survivors in prison for decades. "Mama, you're burning the eggs," Sophia said, tugging at Maya's apron with sleepy insistence. Maya blinked, focusing on the pan before her. The eggs were indeed overdone, but Sophia would eat them anyway. Her daughter had developed remarkable adaptability over the past months. "Sorry, baby. Mine was somewhere else." "Uncle Marcus is here," Sophia announced, pointing toward the living room where Maya could hear her brother's distinctive laugh, mixing with voices she'd grown to recognize. The Hells Angels had changed too. Marcus still wore his cut, but the club had evolved under federal scrutiny into something closer to the brotherhood it had always claimed to be: less criminal enterprise, more family support network. The transformation hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. "Maya?" Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway, his arm finally healed but carrying new scars that matched the ones on his soul. "You ready for this?" Today marked the official end of her federal protection. The safe house, the marshals, the constant security, all of it was ending because there was no one left to fear. Chen was serving multiple life sentences, his network dissolved, and Maya Rodriguez was finally free to live under her own name. "I'm ready," she said, though the words felt strange in her mouth. Freedom was harder to adjust to than hiding had been. Santos knocked on the front door, no longer the corrupt detective who'd played dangerous games, but a man who'd testified against his former handlers and somehow found redemption in the process. He'd taken early retirement from the force, consulting now for federal organized crime units. "How's civilian life treating you?" Maya asked as he joined them for coffee. "Better than I deserve," he admitted, watching Sophia color at the kitchen table. "Some nights, I still can't believe we all walked away from this." But they had walked away, scarred and changed, but alive. The little girl who'd spent a terrifying night in federal protection was now thriving in a good school, making friends, living the normal childhood Maya had always wanted for her. Sophia still had nightmares sometimes, but they were fading. Marcus set down his coffee cup, studying Maya with the careful attention he'd always paid to family. "You know you don't have to do this alone anymore, right? The job, the apartment, raising Sophia, we're here. The club, Santos, all of us." Maya looked around the kitchen, at her brother wearing colors that now represented protection rather than danger, at the former corrupt cop who'd become an unlikely friend, at her daughter drawing pictures of their new life with bright crayons. They'd all been transformed by that fog-shrouded night at Mel's diner, but somehow they'd transformed together. "I know," she said, and meant it completely, "but I think I'm finally ready to try living instead of just surviving." The phone rang. Maya's new supervisor at the community college, where she'd started working as an administrative assistant. A real job with benefits and regular hours, no night shifts, no drunk customers, no looking over her shoulder every time the bell above the door chimed. As she answered the call, discussing mundane details about student enrollment, Maya caught her reflection in the window glass. The woman looking back was still recognizably herself, but different, stronger, no longer running, no longer afraid. She'd learned to use the darkness when necessary, but she'd also learned she didn't have to live in it. Sophia held up her drawing, a house with flowers and stick figures labeled Mama, Uncle Marcus, and Mr. Santos. At the bottom, in careful 6-year-old handwriting, she'd written my family. Maya smiled, feeling something settle in her chest that might have been peace. They'd all paid a price to get here, innocence lost, blood spilled, lives forever changed. But Sophia would grow up free, surrounded by people who'd proven they would die before letting harm touch her. That was worth everything they'd sacrificed. That was worth the woman Maya had become. Outside, Sacramento traffic hummed with ordinary life, and Maya Rodriguez finally understood what normal felt like.